Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us today. We've got Seattle City Council members Dan Strauss and Andrew Lewis here with us for a wonderful panel on mass timber and Passivhaus today. We're excited to have a great hour of programming. We've got three wonderful panelists, Mike Eliason, Tadashi Shiga, and Sloan Ritchie here. Thank you to the Seattle Legislative Department and staff for helping us set this up and getting everything up and running for us. We really appreciate y'all. And council members, thanks for working with us to set up this event. Quick intros of our panelists. And I should say I'm Connor Bronsden. I'm just here to help MC and facilitate the event. So our first speaker is Tadashi. He'll speak for about 10 or 15 minutes on Passivhaus energy standards. He's a trusted advisor to developers, third-party brokers, architects, contractors, and other industry experts for over 3 decades. He's also the owner and operator of Evergreen Certified, which is a leading developer consultancy and certifying agency for sustainable construction practices. They actually verified Seattle's first Passivhaus single-family townhome and apartment. He also serves as the executive director to Realogic Sotheby's International Realty's land division, where he leads a team of brokers aimed at expanding the firm's new development portfolio and introducing boutique project lines that promote affordability and sustainability. Evergreen Certified is also consistently recognized for its accomplishments. They were awarded the Master Builders Association Green Hammer in 2020 and 2013 for Private Advocate and Pioneer Award in 2018. In 2019, Tadashi himself was inducted into the University of Washington Bothel's Hall of Alumni Excellence and was appointed to the institution's Interdisciplinary Arts and Sciences Advisory Board. Tadashi, you want to say hi really quick?
Hello, everybody. I'm very excited to be here, and this is a subject that's very near and dear to my heart.
Awesome, thank you. And next up, we have Sloan Ritchie. Sloan is a pioneer in the Passivhaus movement in Seattle. As both a developer and a general contractor, Sloan draws on building science principles and decades of experience to guide the design and construction of buildings that use up to 80% less energy for heating and cooling. With buildings accounting for nearly 40% of CO2 emissions in the US, Sloan sees the opportunity to address climate change through designing and delivering high quality, comfortable, and efficient buildings. His mission is to demonstrate the scalability and feasibility of using Passivhaus construction techniques to build cost competitive, high performance projects and help establish Seattle as a leader in the nation. Sloan's also a graduate of Whitman College. He has an MBA graduate degree from the University of Washington, and he regularly speaks on the topics of residential green building, Passivhaus, as well as CLT construction. He's a sought after expert for interviews on his approach. I've had the pleasure of interviewing him myself for The Urbanist, his drive, and his project experience. His team and clients appreciate his approachability. Off work, he enjoys windsurfing and traveling with his wife, Jennifer, and their 2 children. Sloan, I believe you did the first multifamily Passivhaus development in Seattle, correct?
Yep, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for being here. And then our third panelist, last but very much not least, is Mike Eliason. Mike's a licensed architect with 15 years of professional experience who's developed his career in innovation in green building. It's particularly Passivhaus, community housing strategies, and innovation mass timber. What I really love about Mike's work, I've been following him for quite some time, is that he works both on products in the US and in Germany. He understands where the leading Passivhaus communities in the EU are and what they're doing, and has helped to bring those techniques and much of that knowledge to the United States. He's given presentations with these topics at various conferences internationally. He's also a well-published writer. I highly recommend you read his work, an activist for dense, livable, affordable, and decarbonized communities. Recently, his projects have included in the US, such places as Western Yacht Harbor, the first building in the West Coast to utilize Dowell-laminated timber, which I hope we get to hear about, as well as the Goldendale Observatory State Park addition or remodel. He's presently working on a 50,000 square foot mass timber school in King County, while also planning a mass timber Passivhaus, and I'm going to mispronounce this, Begrup in Seattle for his wife and kids. You want to make sure I caught that pronunciation, Mike?
Yeah, it's Baugruppe.
Baugruppe. Thank you, and that's the kind of expertise Mike brings. And thank you again to Councilmember Lewis and Councilmember Strauss, who are both members of the Land Use Committee. Councilmember Strauss is the chair, for having us here. We're really excited to get to your questions later. But first off, we've got Tadashi, who's going to speak about Passivhaus energy standards.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen here. You ready to see my screen? Okay, perfect. I really want to thank Connor for that great introduction and the City Council for your time. I'm a 3rd generation Japanese American here in Seattle, but most importantly, I'm a 3rd generation Seattleite. My family's been here for over 110 years. I love this city and I'll never give up on this city. And that's why we're really excited for this opportunity, especially during this challenging time of pandemic, social injustice, economic hardship and uncertainty. I believe that it's during these times of unrest and chaos that people, need the hope and positivity and most importantly, upward direction and cooperation, so we should show, all Seattleites how the public and the private sectors, can work together to reach Seattle and Washington's energy and carbon and affordable housing goals. These are the reasons and times that, we can work together and seize the opportunity to create that path to help our neighbors and our neighborhoods and our city to not only heal, but to inspire. And there's nothing more dear to my heart than Passivhaus and the Seattle Sustainable Community. Okay, so the goal of Seattle and the city has set, was back in actually 2013. But the mayor, Durkins, updated the Seattle climate strategy to be carbon neutral by 2050. That's a very big, lofty goal, but a very valiant goal. And currently right now, the target for 2030 is also, a 20% reduction in the building energy use and a 32% reduction in building emissions. This goal of how do we build the most energy efficient, healthy, sustainable, and resilient buildings in the world, this is something that my panelists have been talking about and trying to do, a lot of sweat and tears of trying to meet this goal. And we believe that Passivhaus and mass timber is one of a great strategies on how to do this. So I'm going to go over why and how, and also what we're doing today, that it's not just a moonshot anymore, and it's not just a dream, we're actually building these things today. And my hats off this is the first FIAS Passivhaus certified in Seattle. It's in Columbus City. And this was, of course, built by Sloan Ritchie. This was over a decade dream and a goal and a culmination of the people's hard work and Sloan being the pioneer that he is. I remember, I think the house that Sloan is sitting in right now, is that the house in Madison Park? Yep, I can recognize it by the Passivhaus windows behind you. That house was one of the first houses that that Seattle built, that Sloan built, and it was actually one of the first Seattle Passivhauses ever built. And then after that, we wanted to build a townhome, and then who stepped up to the plate? It was Sloan. Sloan again built Seattle's first townhome, and then Seattle's first Passivhaus. So kudos to Sloan for sure, because we need pioneers out there that will take the risks to build these buildings so we can learn and have that example. And this is the Pax Futura in Columbia, in the great Columbia City. So this shows you that Passivhaus's green buildings can be sexy and cool and inviting and beautiful. This is the second Passivhaus that was built in actually Capitol Hill. It was also, of course, built by Cascade built Sloan Ritchie. And it's being finishing the certification up right now, and it's in 13th and Pike on Capitol Hill. More beautiful interiors. But here's another project that it's near to my heart too. It's the DESC project, the Downtown Emergency Services Center. It's supportive housing to help Seattle's homeless population. And it's a facility for primary and behavioral health care for residents and the community. Because the nonprofit and affordable housing community wants to provide healthy, safe, affordable, and sustainable housing for the population that really needs it the most. And we need leaders who want to strive to provide these types of buildings right now. And so we can move the majority of the marketplace, not just the few, but the many. So why are we doing this too? Is because we want to create buildings that are healthy environments, that have incredible indoor air quality, And people with compromised health systems, with chemical sensitivities, they need better and more proper ventilation. And also because of COVID and because of the summer times now, isn't it crazy that we are having fires now and that the outdoor air now is worse than the indoor air? Passivhaus solve these issues and creates also occupant comfort, so that there's even temperatures, less cold and hot spots. Also, it's quieter because we're reducing the thermal bridging, which also reduces noise, and then having ultra efficient performance where we can actually save up to 75% of the overall energy use, and then building durability. Of course, we want buildings that are durable, that will last, that will reduce mold and mildew, and that will be a statement of what we've done these times for generations to come. And this picture right here just saddens my heart. If you would have told me growing up here in Seattle that in the future, we won't be able to open up our windows during the summertime because there's smoke everywhere. This is a reminder and a scary sign that we need to lower our carbon emissions and create housing that can clean the air and our healthy environments, especially now because COVID is making us spend more time indoors and it's making us understand that it's important that our environment, our indoor environment, is healthy. This was a picture of a air filter that was taken during the smoke in Seattle for only 3 days. And that's a new filter compared to one that's been used for 3 days. Here is the example of Passivhaus that we did the energy projections of how much we can reduce the energy, the EUI of these projects. So our 2030 goal is to try to reduce it by 20%. But this is an example, Cascadeville's project right here in Columbus City, that we can reduce it by 50%, not 20, 30 years in the future, but actually right now and double it. So this is what gets us excited. So in a nutshell, how does Passivhaus work? Well, it's a fairly easy concept. However, it's taken thousands of hours of sweat and anxiety and tears and mistakes to get us where we're at today. But Seattle's biggest advantage is that we have an outstanding brain and heart trust of people who know how to execute this and deliver Passivhauses right now that are actually affordable. It does take integrative design process, better and more thoughtful design through Passivhaus, but we can do this right now. And it takes air sealing details, which we really want to provide a submarine airtight building enclosure. And there's a slogan that we say in the Passivhaus community, you build it tight and vent it right. In Seattle, what that does that we normally want to keep the heat in and the cold out, and now also the smoke out. We want to do this also by having continuous insulation, or the best insulation that you could do, that you could put in these buildings to eliminate the amount of heat going in and out of our buildings. Of course, you're going to have Passivhaus insulation like this, which looks like this in a building, to mitigate that thermal bridging. Best practices to have continuous thermal breaks throughout the entire building. We also want to, let in the sun during the wintertime when it's low in the south horizon, but also block it during the hot summers. It's that simple. This is a picture on the left-hand side of my team looking at this building. And this is also another project that Cascadeville is building right now in Queen Anne. And as you can notice, it has all these like overhead walkways, breezeways. And I was asking, how are they going to eliminate the thermal bridging how that bridgeway is attached to the building? And you can see on the right-hand picture, those are insulative blocks that help the thermal bridging. But it's these types of attention to details that we figured out how to do and that we keep on figuring out how to do at each project. That is our advantage here in Seattle, but the things that we need to pay attention to in order to produce a building that has such an amazing low energy use. Which another thing is the components of the building, which is important, of course, is triple pane windows, low U values, thermally insulated frames, multi-point locking mechanisms for air tightness. You know, this creates a building that is durable, comfortable, healthy, and energy efficient. And when we're trying to make a building that is super airtight like a submarine, we have to pay attention to all the thousands of cracks and gaps, so we can control the air and deliver fresh, clean, and tempered air into the building. And when you're able to stop the air, one of the biggest advantages of these buildings is all buildings and humans need to breathe. And how they're able to breathe and control and filter the air is through heat recovery ventilation systems. So it takes the hot air that we spend a lot of money heating up, and when it exhausts it, it goes through a heat exchanger and it directs it outside. But most importantly, when it brings in the new air, we can filter it with a HEPA filter. It goes through the heat exchanger, and then we can appropriately distribute it and control it to the places where we want to get air out and bring fresh air in. And most buildings do not have this, but we're figuring this out because of like Cascade Build and the Passivhaus community. So, you know, we can do this together. You know, the Emerald City, I believe, can become that shining gem that other cities can look up to and point to and get inspired from. But if we can pull together and work together, this is all possible.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tadashi. Up next, we have Mike Eliason. Mike, you want to take it away?
Yep, I'm going to share my screen.
Awesome.
Let's see.
And thank you so much, Tadashi. That was fascinating.
Okay. Do you see a log?
We do. We see a giant log.
Okay, hold on just 1 second. Everybody disappeared. Okay, so I'll keep my video off for this, keep it short and simple. But one of the things for me that's really important is that policy is paramount to really expediting the reach of this, right? We need the market to get there, but what's really driven the mass timber and Passivhaus community in Europe has been legislative policy. So for me, it's kind of this this really good meshing, right? We need a little bit of the market, right? But the market needs incentives, and so the legislation can kind of do that. Hold on just 1 second. Okay, sorry. You know, timber is really crucial to the history of Seattle and the history of the Northwest. We have these amazing forests that some of them are still intact. The Cascadia bioregion is just, you know, this phenomenal place. Our older buildings in Pioneer Square and the ID, right? They're all built of mass timber. It's kind of this this design, this architecture that we know about. But mass timber today is really about prefabrication. It's really about kind of engineered components and doing things offsite to do you know, these really elegant and high quality buildings. So what is mass timber? Like I said, so Auto Row in Capitol Hill, all of these old buildings, these big heavy timber frames, you could qualify this as mass timber, but all of this stuff was really built on site, right? Like it wasn't being engineered and constructed in a workshop. It's not prefabricated, right? So it's kind of everything it was done on site. But what's happened in the last 30 years, specifically around Germany, Switzerland, and Austria, is there's been this this huge push towards innovative wood products to build high quality, low energy buildings. And so some of the components that they're using, glulam, which is on the top left, we have that here in Seattle. Cross-laminated timber, coming clockwise on the right, which is kind of like plywood, but it's several inches thick, right? So it's several layers of wood that are alternating the direction that they go. On the bottom right, this is dowel laminated timber. This is effectively 2x6s. They're all ganged together on an end, and they run a dowel that friction fits everything. So there's no glues for the dowel laminated timber. It's a really elegant product. There are a number of different profiles that you can do. And so we're seeing these components start to be fabricated in the US. I think in 2011, Structure Lamb up in BC was one of the first outfits to start building CLT. And then today in the Pacific Northwest, we have about 5 or 6 outfits that are making these panels and bringing them up out to market. But there hasn't been a lot of push from the US side until recently on kind of innovation and research. British Columbia has had a wood first policy for a long time. They've got a lot of funds and strategies to really kind of expedite, the development of this. And so when we look at the adoption of mass timber in British Columbia, like it's unfathomable, how many projects they've had going in the last couple of years. But like I said, the heart has really been Central Europe, and so CLT, DLT, those products came about, 25, 30 years ago. But in the time since, they've really taken this to another level. There's this whole value-added timber industry. They've got more innovative products that they've online. These are just various things that you can get in Europe now that we can't quite get here. Hopefully one day, we'll be in that position. But they're really pushing these innovative ways to construct buildings that look good. They have the potential to store carbon, depending on, if the forests that the wood is coming from are sustainably harvested. There's the whole aspect of biophilia, right? So you look at wood, it feels good, it looks good, you can smell, the wood components, it reduces your blood pressure, and it's this connection to nature, right? Like it's such a phenomenal building product. And so the EU has really just been running with this. The big thing now is, prefabrication, offsite construction, rapid erection. So all of this component is framed. It's all built in a factory. So it's safer for the people who are building it. It's clean, it's dry. And all of the products, all the components are built off site. They're brought in on a truck and craned directly into place. And because of the processes and the quality controls they go through, the design and fabrication of all of this, right? It goes together like butter. It just drops in place, fastens, and you're good to go. The thing that I love about this is that, especially in the time of COVID, these projects don't require a huge number of employees on the site at the same time. With a medium-sized mass timber project, you've got maybe somewhere between 5 and 8 guys kind of putting everything together, and you still have all of your other trades and everybody else is busy. But during the structure installation, it's fast, it's clean, it's safe, it's quiet for neighbors, right? So with concrete and steel, it's loud. There's smells coming off of the site. There's a lot more trucks that come onto the site. So, in urban housing, I think there's something really fascinating about looking at mass timber as this component of building better within, our neighborhoods. And as we continue to densify in our urban villages outside of the downtown core, I really feel that will become fairly critical. So you could have solid panels. This is a CLT panel. It's erected off site, brought into place, craned, and fastened down. It's super quick process. Floors, I think you can do, it depends on manufacturer and some other things, but you can do, 10,000 square feet in a day. So if you have a building that's 5,000 square feet and 4 floors, conceivably you could get it framed up in a couple of days. The other thing that's really fascinating about Europe and British Columbia and the Passivhaus community are really starting to push this as well. You get your exterior components, your walls, your roofs, right? Everything comes installed, ready to be put in place with no finishes necessary. So all of this, again, is done in a factory. Your windows are installed, your siding is installed. They bring it out to site when it's needed, and boom, it's dropped right into place. Modular wood modules have become a in the wood community in Europe. We see this on some multifamily housing in the US, but not at the scale that we do in Germany. They're using it for schools, they're using it for dormitories, hotels. There's some really just beautiful hotels using these CLT wood modules, and even social housing for refugees. And in the last couple of years, the industry has moved towards building taller, and we've seen some proposals for some tall mass timber projects in Seattle. There's a number that are in process, tower 60 floor tower underway for Vancouver. Again, passive house, mass timber, but there's aspects with the fire rating that need to be thought through. And so one of the ways to do that is to combine the fire resistance and strength of concrete, so having the concrete floor, but using the flexibility of the wood to kind of hold that frame. So again, building this hybrid component offsite and then trucking it right into place and dropping it onto wood columns and fastening it in place when it's needed. So what is it about mass timber that pairs well with passive house? I like to call it the passive house blend, right? House blend coffee. There's something that very Seattle about that. So this is a picture of a CLT floor and wall intersection. The black stripes are acoustic separation between the elements, but what's critical here is the black and white is the air sealing tape. So Tadashi talked about the airtightness of a passive house project. Well, with a product like CLT, the CLT panel itself is airtight, and the gaps become critical to maintaining that airtightness for the rest of the building. So it becomes really easy to make this building airtight, right? Like you're following the gaps of construction and sealing it, with tapes and membranes as you go along. And the walls. So the Building Science Corporation is a big building science industry group on the East Coast. They like to talk about the perfect wall. And so the perfect wall is you have your rain shedding element on the outside, your insulation inboard of that to keep everything warm and dry. You've got your weather barrier that keeps everything tight, and then your structure all the way on the inside, right? So all of this is kind of this really clean and efficient approach to separating everything out and having this building that is durable, like Tadashi said. It's high quality, it's pleasant to look at. And so mass timber takes this concept and really just kind of amplifies it, right? So we have our rain screen, which could be, metal, wood, whatever you want to do, and then the support, the battens for the rain screen. Our insulation, again, goes on the outside, and this is critical for passive house. This is what gives us our continuous insulation that's thermally broken, right? So we're breaking the outside envelope and the air temperatures outside with our structure. What this also does is this moves the dew point outboard of our structure. So our CLT, our mass timber structure, will never have mold issues or moisture issues unless there ends up being a leak in the building. So it really becomes a way of ensuring the durability and longevity of these products, which is good because when the building is kind of reached its effective lifespan, then we can reutilize these panels. The other thing that's really great with passive house and larger buildings is our heating systems are driven down. So like I said, I'm working on a 50,000 square foot school, mass timber school in King County. It's not being designed to passive house, so we have a sizable mechanical space for our heater. If it was being designed to passive house, our heating system for our hot water and our space heating would be incredibly small. So this is a picture that my buddy Nick Grant took of a school, passive house school in England. That little boiler is the sole heater for a 25,000 square foot school. So it's not taking up much space. So there could be economic savings there as well. The one thing with multifamily and public works with passive houses, the HRVs tend to get larger. Our energy codes are already moving in this direction with requirements for dedicated outdoor air. And so what this really does is it takes it up a notch, right? So we get the filtered air that Tadashi talked about. We're keeping our heat inside. We're really creating a space that's got a high quality interior environment for workers, for people who live there, for students, right? Like air quality in schools is critical, especially during COVID. And we don't want a lot of carbon dioxide building up in rooms. And so this helps control that. And then it helps control, just the rate of fresh air. And everyone that I've talked to in the passive house community for the last month, the smoke issue and COVID, so air quality, ventilation, it's really the only thing anyone's talking about. All of the other issues I think are critical, but I think moving forward, the cascades are drying out, right? We're gonna need to look at utilizing public works as like these fresh air centers. So if we're building them to passive house, right, then we're ensuring that these are like a space of respite that people can go when we have weeks and weeks and weeks of smoke. So just a couple of built examples. This is a school. There are a ton of passive house schools in Europe, or passive house mass timber schools in Europe. Mass timber is, gyms, pools, sports centers, community centers. The ice hockey arena in Northgate is planned to be mass timber. In Europe, kindergartens and daycare facilities, again, this really nice blend of passive house and mass timber, right? I mean, as a kid, I never would have been able to go to a space like this, but this is a really vibrant, look, and it's comfortable. Kids don't have to worry about getting cold. And then it's the same thing with schools, right? Like these really elegant spaces, high quality, comfortable. It's a really solid learning environment. And housing. So it's applicable for social housing, market rate housing, this broad array of housing that we could be building mass timber passive house projects. And so here's some of the things that the EU and a couple of other places are doing on policy. In 2010, the EU signed off on the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. And this is a broad array of policies designed to basically kickstart the improvement of really poor energy performance in building stock. So, you have to think about the EU, Europe, buildings that are hundreds of years old. A lot of them don't even have insulation. So they're taking it to the point where, okay, we need new construction to be energy efficient, but we have to come back and improve all of our existing stock because it's moldy, it's not durable, it costs a lot to heat, and then it's also using a ton of energy through that process. By 2016, they updated that legislation that all buildings built by the end of 2020 had to be nearly zero energy buildings. The Passive House community has been leading on this for over a decade at this point. And effectively, Passive House is a nearly zero energy building. And so we're seeing that states are utilizing Passive House as a means of incorporating that. The German state of Baden-Württemberg in 2018 passed the Holzbau Offensive. It's a wood construction offensive. It's a state-sponsored initiative for the promotion of utilizing local wood, local mass timber, local jobs, right? And adopting modern timber practices for multifamily, kindergartens, schools is really an element of their climate protection strategy. Similarly, the federal state of Salzburg, so there's the city, but around it is the federal state. This year, they're looking at adopting a mandate, a 20% mandate for wood construction in multifamily buildings. And on top of this, the EU has a ton of programs that they've been doing for the last decade that are focused on, how do we finance and financially support the research and the marketing and the industry itself to bring these kinds of projects online. So Zebra 2020 was one of the early ones. That was policy recommendations and strategies for nearly zero energy buildings. Big Wood is a smaller collaboration between Italy and Austria has been a huge driver on the mass timber front. So it's sharing the research, market adoption, developing standards, and really breaking down a lot of the barriers to mass timber. And then Build in Wood, which is a recent one, is about building multi-story mass timber buildings in the EU. And on the city level, over the last decade, there are a number of cities in Europe that have been, in Vancouver as well, New York City, that have been really pushing the threshold of incentivizing or even mandating these kinds of projects. So in Aachen in 2010, the city council came together and said, okay, all public work basically has to be Passive House. By 2020, they had updated it, and it was all buildings, not just public buildings, needed to meet those standards. And that aligns with the nearly zero energy requirements of the EU as well. In 2010, Brussels underwent a similar policy. They offered financial incentives, training for workers, promotional programs, to really kind of build up this industry on the development side, on the construction side, so that by 2015, which is when they required that all buildings be Passive House, it wouldn't be this huge hurdle for everybody. Vancouver has been a powerhouse here in the Northwest. They've got Passive House towers, huge uptake in mid-rise buildings, townhouses. They presently have a number of FAR bonuses. If you meet Passive House, there's exemptions for mechanical spaces, for walls, because Passive House walls need to be thicker for the insulation and everything else. They have staff that facilitate projects, which I think is really critical and important. And their permitting staff is knowledgeable on this. They've had people that have gone through the training, they've taken the builder trainings. Similarly, this year, the city of Tübingen, which is a small city, but they required that all public projects and all projects utilizing public lands and public financing needed to meet Passive House. And that was their way of kind of making sure that their city's buildings are meeting the EU mandate. And then Freiburg, similarly, 2014, all public projects to meet Passivhaus. In 2019, which is last year, they went through and they really started kickstarting the wood construction side as well. So they have some incredibly elegant wood projects that have come online. One of the things for me as an architect I love is the region of Vorarlberg, which is the westernmost federal state of Austria. The landscape looks like our landscape, right? Mountains, alpine meadows, these huge forests. And it's also the heart of Passivhaus in Austria. It's the heart of the innovative mass timber industry as well. The workers who are building things in this region are exporting their knowledge and their products, around the world. It's the highest quality stuff I've ever seen. And so potentially there could be some kind of regional collaboration as well. Like how do we learn from these places that are doing these really incredible things, durable buildings, high quality buildings? How do we tap into that? How do we incentivize that? How do we foster the environment where this becomes the norm and not just meeting the bare minimum? As Tadashi said, we only have a couple of mass timber multifamily passive house projects in the city. So we have a long way to go, but we have the know-how, we have the people, and we also have the roots. So this is a patent application from 1923 from some guys down in Tacoma, right? This is in our roots, right? We can do this. So that's what I have.
Thank you so much, Mike. That was fascinating. I'm really excited to get more into the depth of what's happening historically and across the world, mass timber. Sloan Ritchie is up next of Cascade Build to talk to us about the synergy of Passivhaus and mass timber. And Sloan, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Hey, Tadashi, if you could throw up a slide or two of some buildings, that'd be a good background. Yeah, that's perfect. I am just going to talk. I'm mainly knowledgeable about Passivhaus. We've done a little bit of mass timber, but not quite as much as we've done in the Passivhaus world. So I'll focus mainly on that. Again, my name is Sloan Ritchie. My company does general contracting and real estate development. We've been in the sustainable building space for about 15 years with a focus on energy efficiency. And we have been interested in Passivhaus for about 10 years or so. I don't have a horse in the race in terms of green building programs, but having done LEED and Built Green and tried a few other things, Passivhaus is a truly outstanding system for getting real results. So that's kind of what we discovered is if we can just focus on a few building elements and reduce energy consumption by 50% compared to code minimum, then that's something we should be doing. So that's kind of how we got into this. We started with a single family project, as Tadashi mentioned, and have just been scaling up slowly and sensibly here over the years. And as you can see from some of the images, we've been doing some larger projects. The one in the image here is a 35-unit building. We just completed a 45-unit building. We've delivered about 100 or so Passivhaus units over the years. And so we've really kind of figured out how to do it. I think the bottom line is, from my perspective, from being a business person in the city, is this is doable right now in today's market with today's subcontractors, today's vendors. We in the Seattle market, we can execute these projects. There's nothing about it that can't be executed. And that wasn't true 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was a reach and we were importing things from overseas. But now it's doable with today's sort of market players. We have another 200 units in the pipeline that will be Passivhaus. And so they will be using a lot less energy than our competition. But 200 units, just to put that in context, that's about 2% of the units that will be delivered in any given year in our region. So it's really kind of still just a drop in the bucket. And I think that, one thing I'd like to point out is that, with all the headwinds and challenges that developers and contractors face, I think one of the largest of those, in fact, is something that the city might be able to help out with, and that is, our entitlement process with the city has gotten longer and longer over the years. And I would say that, to be in that entitlement phase for 18 months, which I think is maybe more common these days, is something that if the city wanted to do something about improving or promoting these types of projects, either the mass timber projects and the Passivhaus projects that will really move us forward, I think it would be kind of cool if the city would consider approaches to dramatically shorten those timeframes. Otherwise, you'll just have players like us who kind of out on the fringes doing these types of projects. And I think that other market players, much in the way that the Built Green and the master builders have done by bringing all these builders into the fold, by letting them do the Built Green 4 and 5 star. I think that the city could do something more to promote this type of project, and it would be really great if they would consider like dramatically reducing the time frame and committing to a shortened duration permitting pipeline. So I guess that's kind of what I've got to say about these projects. And
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sloan. So we've got about 18 minutes left here for questions from the council members. Dan or Andrew, either of you want to step in?
Sure. Thanks, Connor. And thank you so much for facilitating this. I mean, just to give a little bit of kind of background on my interest, particularly in the mass timber side of this, for years, it's something that's really struck me as a policy area that's in the city's wheelhouse. And there's a lot of attention that we spend on transportation as part of our climate strategy, which we should, and that's an essential part of our contribution as well. But I think, too often at the city, we do tend to, I think, forget sometimes that in addition to sort of our role with utilities, in addition to our role with transportation, our built environment, not just the buildings themselves, but also the processes by which they are created, can be a really big driver of emissions and can be a big part of our carbon accounting that we need to be mindful of. So I want to say I really appreciated these presentations and everybody on the panel. I think in terms of moving forward, I mean, my questions are basically about getting down to brass tacks on this. And I'd be interested to hear from panelists broadly, what are some of the barriers, particularly from the city of Seattle? What things would be useful from Dan and I as policymakers in terms of changes to the building code, changes to permitting regulations, things that we have control over as the city that we can streamline, waive, or eliminate, not only for passive housing, but also for incentivizing the use of some of these materials, particularly mass timber. And then the other question I would have, or the other area, I guess, that I would throw out to the panelists is generally, what are some of the hurdles for the marketplace on mass timber in the Pacific Northwest? Like, what will the market bear in terms of demand and production to be able to be a bigger part of our built environment, and how can that work be done in an environmentally conscious and equitable way, seeing that we are still talking about the harvesting of timber, which can have environmental implications, as we're all very well aware. So those would be my two kind of areas of questions. I'd like to hear more in really drilling down into what we can do here in the city of Seattle and the region. And just appreciate everyone here not only making themselves available to Dan and I, but to the public, and being able to record this and share it later with people who I know are doing great work in this field and would like to roll up their sleeves and help to drive forward any action items that come out of this conversation.
Maybe I can speak right now. Yeah, thank you very much, Andrew. I really appreciate your enthusiasm and for this cause. So in a nutshell, when I've talked to a lot of the people in our industry on what can actually move the marketplace, just as Sloan has been mentioning, is regarding something that's simple that we can target is these permit times. If we can actually have it so that, let's take example, the land use and the permit times, instead of being 18 months or plus, which creates a lot of anxiety for the developers and also the investors, and makes a slower process of providing affordable housing to Seattle. If we can have it so that it's all done within, like, let's say 6 months, we feel like is pretty reasonable. If there is if we can create someone in the city, in the permit department that can be like a liaison for that could make sure that we are getting enough support and enough knowledge base there that can help build these high performance homes in Seattle. That would be an amazing feat. I don't think is too much of a big ask, but if we bring all the partners together on all sides to really figure out at a table saying like, hey, what do we need to do in order to make this happen within 6 months? I think that would be admirable. And if we're all there with the right intentions, we can really move the marketplace, because what's going to happen, just like in the city of Seattle before, when I used to talk to builders and they were like, Built Green 4-star, we'll never be able to do that. It's too expensive. But when the city of Seattle with the Department of the CDI say like, hey, you know what? Let's give incentives to the builders. Let's have expedited permitting and also a higher FAR example for the building community. Well, then what happened is that the builders just said like, hey, that's very valuable to us. We'll figure it out. And what was before like impossible became the possible, and now it's mostly the probable. Now Seattle leads the country with all these sustainable homes. I imagine like if you see a townhome in Seattle, a 90% chance they're taking advantage of the FAR incentive and they're doing Built Green 4-star. These are substantive changes that we've done as a city and as a community. So taking up the next level to make a big impact is having builders that are, Sloan is completely, the pioneer and a leading example, but there are a lot of other builders who are like the Built Green 4-star builders who, you know what, if we can say like you can get a permit within 6 months, and if you do that, if you built a passive house or if you built a mass timber, they will really consider it. And I believe maybe 20-30% more projects will actually, that who won't do it, will actually do it. And it'll make a difference so that we can hit our carbon goals, our goals that will actually, even I believe, will inspire more people and more communities that can build up more technology and a workforce that provide jobs that are local here and healthier and more dynamic communities.
I would echo that, in that the Built Green program that's been around for maybe 10 years now has been very successful in bringing people into the fold who might otherwise not have thought it to be possible and now are evangelists for it. And I think the same thing would be true here. And really, it was the city putting together its incentive program. That's what really moved the needle for Built Green and made it the program that it has become, by having a priority permitting and an FAR incentive. And I think that a similar program for Passivhaus, like what Tadashi mentioned, say, let's cut the permit time down. If we can do it all in 6 months and make design review streamlined or go away, that would bring a lot of people into the fold, because it reduces a big uncertainty. And I think plenty of people, speaking as just a member of that business community and general contractors and developers, to reduce that market risk and uncertainty, they'd be willing to step up and go this direction, whereas otherwise they're kind of just afraid of it. So I think that's a true statement, and I think that would be incredibly helpful. So that feels like something that the city and other stakeholders could work together to develop. Thank you.
On the mass timber side, there's a couple of issues. I think one is we're still working through code issues, specifically around kind of the seismic components of mass timber, right? So on our project, we're using steel brace frames because it's easier than it is to go through the process of using the mass timber at this point. In the next couple of years, as the codes get updated, We'll start seeing taller buildings. I think that'll reduce some of the barriers. We'll start seeing buildings that are full wood, so no hybrid, concrete wood or steel wood to deal with the seismic aspects. The market is a big issue though. There's so much demand that some companies are out years in producing products that we can utilize locally. So there aren't that many manufacturers that are accessible, I think, at this point. The sourcing, Andrew, I think is critical. We can't call mass timber sustainable. I'm even leery on the full carbon sequestration if we're not sourcing properly, right? So FSC it plays a critical role in that as well. And end of life usage of the panels, right? Are they being burned or thrown in a landfill? Those things start to make a huge difference as well. I think the market is slowly getting there. The demand there is huge though. There's so many opportunities. And I think from the city side, again, any kind of incentive. So I don't FAR, height, I think those things could help. Mandates though, like the city I don't know that the city could today say, okay, moving forward, 20% of all public projects have to be built with mass timber. In Europe, a lot of the cities have more control over the processes for that, and so they're able to kind of tailor it. But I think that there is some aspect there that could be tweaked or tuned. And then the other process with the public work is contracting itself can play a big role. So design, bid, build, which is kind of our typical public procurement process, isn't really geared towards utilizing mass timber right now because it's so kind of tuned and different. It's not it's not like your typical construction where you could get steel from here or steel from there. So really kind of pushing, departments if they're interested in going this route to look at GCCM, approach, something that's a little bit different that would be better geared towards, the adoption and incorporation of mass timber, from the very beginning. It's not really something that we can add on after the fact. It's same with Passivhaus, right? Like it's impossible to make a building be Passivhaus if you wait until permitting and say, oh, hey, can we make this a Passivhaus? Let's move forward, right? It's kind of this integral process that has to start really from the beginning. And so that's the client is going to drive a lot of that.
Thank you, gentlemen. This has been a very excellent presentation. I have long been interested in cross-laminated timber, understanding both the environmental impacts that we don't have to break new ground to harvest more gravel out of the ground to create concrete, and understanding that your cross-laminated timber is also sequestering CO2. One of my questions is, how do we understand and how do we certify that the timber we are using is sustainably harvested so that we're not continuing to add to the demand for clear cutting or old growth forests? How is it that we can really determine and certify that the wood that we're using is coming from thinning the forests rather than clear cutting? Mike, you're on mute, I believe.
I'm very sorry.
There we are.
I think the chain of custody becomes critical at that point, right? So FSC has this very rigorous process to ensure that the lumber that is being extracted goes through their protocols, so that we can call it sustainable. SFI, which is the Canadian, it's not quite as stringent as FSC, but it's SFI is kind of the Canadian equivalent. Kind of has similar protocols. I do think that it is critical that we're not stripping, old growth wood. But if we can go through and thin out forests, at Vaughan in Colville, I think that's their approach, right? They go through and they're thinning out these forests. There's the potential for, reducing fire risk, right? With something like that. So I think that there is this, and for me, it's like this really interesting aspect of, okay, rural, urban, jobs, environment, right? This is really elegant connection that can be made. And so it's really, we just have to ensure that, our chain of custody and, all of our specifications are highly tuned so that we're doing the right thing from an environmental standpoint.
Thank you. I mean, I think that is really critical, because if we're not harvesting our timber in a sustainable way, then we're undercutting our own mission here. just really in the most basic terms, I have a fundamental interest in the passive house and how airtight vented right really is able to be a feedback loop in and of itself. Can you share a little bit more about how a building can be self-regulating as far as temperature, and how the inputs for temperature and environmental controls within the building can be reduced by being airtight and vented right?
Sloan, you want to take that?
Sure, I'll give that one a shot. So I guess if I understand the question, we're talking about how a passive house built structure would more or less self-regulate in a way. I think that, part of it, having lived in one for the last 8 years and built quite a few, we've kind of learned a little bit about how they operate. Probably one of the key features is that the energy load is much lower. So you don't need as much energy to heat and cool the home. You also are more distinct. You're thermally separated from what's happening outside the home. So as it heats up more during the day, you've got more insulation, and you're air sealed from what's happening. So instead of cold air leaking in and the furnace needing to kick on all the time, you're more insulated from that. Whatever's happening inside the house it's a much more continual through the day, not changing kind of environment. The nice thing is, once if your house is 70 degrees, it doesn't change much, even though it's cold at night and hot during the day. So it just requires a lot less energy. The heat recovery ventilator is bringing in fresh air continuously, but capturing the energy on the way out and keeping it in the home. So I'm not sure if this really answering your question. There's a whole lot of technical details, but I think it's just the basic sense of, think of the way if you have if you had a grocery bag and you threw your cold drinks in there, they'd last a half an hour in the car before they're worthless. But if you had a really great quality cooler and you threw your cold drinks in there, they'd last there for several days. It's kind of along those lines, where the interior environment is just maintained. And I can also say, with the wildfire smoke and whatnot, I've been very fortunate to live inside of a passive house and know that I'm breathing healthy indoor air. So.
Thanks. You answered my question I mean, that's exactly it. Just that we need fewer resources to maintain the temperature in the building, and the building itself is working as an insulated element from the outside variations in temperature and weather. Since I've heard from both of you, I guess I'll just, and noticing we're almost out of time, just wanted to also thank Tadashi. I think that you may be the longest generational Seattleite on this call, and just wanted to really thank you for joining us today. Thank you, everyone.
Well, I appreciate your time. So my ask is that, is it possible so that we can actually start some type of discussion with your members and other parts of the city and how we can actually accomplish this?
Yeah, I'd welcome the conversation, and I'd be happy to follow up after the lunch and learn. Yeah,
I mean, just speaking for myself, absolutely. And, Councilmember Strauss and I, both serve on the land use committee, and presumably a lot of this would go through that committee. So I'm certainly committed to continuing, at least in talking with, between my office and everyone on this panel, in ways that we might be able to move forward on some action items in the city of Seattle. So totally.
Hey, fantastic. Thank you so much for everybody's time, Sloan, Mike, and Connor, for putting this together. We're looking forward to a brighter future with everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, council members.
Thank you.